just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. So we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and other people's success is my success, and vice versa.
Because you know what, like the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. Garret Harrell is president and principal consultant of Southern Cross Leadership Solutions, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business headquartered in Wilmington, North Carolina, providing consulting and professional training services. Through Southern Cross, Garrett's purpose is to help companies build and sustain high-performance teams through customized solutions that drive engagement, inspire empowerment, and bolster enablement to boost performance and accomplish any mission. A retired U.S. Marine, Garret developed his expertise in high-performance teams after serving 14 of his 21 years of active service in special operations assignments and varying levels of team leadership positions. Garrett's team development model follows a patented approach, which is talents-based, inclusion-focused, and mission-oriented, and coupled with a proprietary goal achievement process. In addition to his real-world experience, Garret has made it his journey in life to study leadership concepts and high-performance teams. He holds a Master of Science in Strategic Leadership from the University of Charleston, an Executive Certificate in Leadership from the University of Notre Dame, as well as an Executive Certificate in General Management from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College. We had some fun talking with Garret about high-performance teams. What's the difference between an effective team and a high-performance team? How might you set up structure within your company to empower and enable your employees to reach their true potential? And what sort of principles does Garret implement in his work that were gleaned from his days as a U.S. Marine? Let's find out as we dive into this week's episode with Garret Harrell. All right, welcome to another episode of Truth Seekers. We have Garret Harrell joining us today. Garret, thanks for joining us.
Guys, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I figured we could start in the area of team building. So much of what Coach and I do is, yes, on an individual basis, but we also coach executive level teams, and we have some approaches for some common principles for how to coach teams to be high performing teams. Just checking your LinkedIn bio, you probably knew I was coming here, but there's a quote that says, "I help build badass teams." Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, in my experience, I saw what the difference was between effective and high performance teams, right? And I tell people I spent 21 years in the military. The last 14 years of my career was spent as a Marine special operator. And I tell people all the time, I was on, I think, 8 different teams within those 14 years. And I count 3 of them as being high performing. It doesn't mean that the other 5 weren't highly effective or full of high performers, because they were. We were highly effective, and it was built of high performers. But the team as a collective in and of itself wasn't necessarily high performing. You understand the difference between effectiveness and performance, then people, they begin to understand what I'm talking about. And I tell people, effectiveness is behavior based. There's things that we can do to build better mindset, build better behaviors, change behaviors to be a better collective, because together we're better than alone. But at the end of the day, and both of you know this as well as anyone, teamwork is about results. And in order to be high performing, we have to be focused on attaining those results. And that's through processes, specifically processes that focus on goals, roles, and norms, right? And building those processes, being able to plan and manage and appropriately track goals, understanding how roles fit goals, and then understanding what team norming processes look like. And in my experience, I had 3 teams that we understood that, and it was really all defined by one word, and that word is commitment, right? commitment is one of those behavioral aspects that is required of effective teams. But there's that degree of commitment is supercharged when it comes to high performing teams.
And your first answer here, you've hit on so many principles already with what we're all about.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Coach take what he grabbed away and just ask further questions here.
Thank you, Garrett. So an effective team is a team which is making progress in behavior. So you're seeing upgrades and changes in people's mindsets, but not necessarily in the collective focus on achieving results, which is what you define as high performance, if I got that right, which is processes, plans, defined roles, so you can hit the goals. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah. What I would say is that effectiveness is reached when the understanding that collective results outweigh individual results. I think that is when effectiveness, and that's when those behaviors that matter most. So, we talk about the ability to build trust. We talk about appropriate conflict management and resolution, accountability, which is huge. Once those behaviors start developing, again, and the idea of collective results outweighing those of the individual, effectiveness is achieved, and then that's when you can really start narrowing down what needs to be done in order to achieve higher performance.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for that distinction, because that's really helpful, because we work in something we call the AAA approach. And our first part of it, so let me go to the second. The second A is action plan, which is what I would suggest is what you're saying is we need to have defined roles, defined goals.
Yes.
There's no point doing that if we're not clear that we want to be on the bus together and we're going to go on this journey together.
Absolutely correct.
So our first A is awareness. Right? Oh man, this is so cool to hear the different language you're using here from a military perspective. So cool, because most people know that you got to have a plan. Without a plan, you can't get there, right? Because you haven't got one, and you can't having goals is important, but people don't have any concept of how to actually get there, right? And it's like, don't even start there. Just bring it way back. Like, are we doing things why are you here? Are you here for everyone? Are you here for long term, or are you just here for yourself and to win short term and get the hell out of it? Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I've mentioned this before. It's Covey's principle of dependence moving to independence, and then the last one is interdependence. Right? We're all actually better together, and that's the indicator of the high performance team when everybody's bought into that model. Because then you show up, you know what's expected of you, you know where you're going, what the goal is. And I'm curious what the difference was in your experience, Garrett, with those three teams. Like, was it even more of a rewarding, like how would you separate, or how would you categorize or compare the difference?
So I would say first and foremost, it was understanding that the commitment was much deeper. Now, one common denominator among those three teams was we were much smaller, right? So the typical special operations team that I was part of was typically 14 individuals. These teams were 3 and I think 6 respectively. 2 teams of 3, and then one was 6 people. So I think that smaller number gave us better understanding of what each other was bringing to the table. I think we were better off understanding how to articulate what the mission was. So our commitment to achieving mission was higher. Because there were less of us, we were able to hold each other more accountable, and it was very apparent when somebody wasn't carrying their water, so to speak. So those are definitely some defining characteristics.
Yeah, that's where that accountability just turns into total, complete ownership, right? If there's somebody not, it's so obvious. So tell me how this translates into your business, and if you want to plug it and tell us a little bit more about what you have going on, that would be great too.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was transitioning from the military, this was last year. This is actually, I'm 1 year from retirement this month. Actually, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and I started doing some facilitation for a few leadership development companies. And what I learned was that I had been doing this for a long time. In fact, 5.5 of my 14 years, I was an instructor of sorts, whether it was a qualification course or whether it was advanced training for the people in my command. And I really enjoyed it. I really loved developing others and being able to bring my experience to the table to help others be able to see things before they experienced them, so they at least had a leg up, so to speak. And I was doing some leadership facilitation, and what I saw was, as I was going into organizations, a lot of what we talked about was engagement. And I know that you guys understand that very well. And what wasn't translating for me was seeing success and seeing results and really just focusing on engagement. Engagement is huge, right? In an organization, you want someone to be engaged. You want them emotionally committed to see the organization succeed. But that in and of itself does not equal results, right? You have to get them engaged. You have to empower. But at the end of the day, you have to enable them. And you enable them with tools. And part of that toolkit is helping teams understand how to really plan and manage goals as a collective, right? These are team determined. How to understand roles, and roles, across the board, people have a misunderstanding that jobs and roles are one and the same, and that they're not. A job is something that you do on a daily basis. This is my A to B that I have to do, my task that I'm assigned. My role is the value that I bring to the organization. And that role is translated via knowledge, skills, abilities, experiences, culture, talent, strengths, weaknesses, perspectives, right? It's a myriad of things. And when you understand what everybody's bringing to the table, you understand how to better clarify roles that fit actions to achieve certain goals. So I saw the gap there, and I just started sort of bringing that into some of the things that I was doing. And I saw that last piece was what was being better received, because that was the gap. People didn't understand it. In fact, I would say 90% out of the time, people at the foundational level didn't even understand what the vision or the values were of the organization. So if you can't translate a strategy, if no one even understands the vision, there's no way you translate that strategy all the way down the totem pole. So I started doing that, so I was like, well, there's something here. So I did. I started a company. It's called Southern Cross Leadership Solutions. It's southerncrosscrew.com, and that's what we do. We like to go in to organizations. We like to jump in at the foundational level with organic teams that are struggling. Maybe they're effective, but they want to achieve more. And we take it back a notch, and we start with an engagement phase where we do help them learn more about themselves through a couple of different behavioral assessments and some individual leadership development. Then we bring it together in a collective environment, and we focus on exercises to build that team, that cohesion, and the effectiveness, which are directly proportional, right? The more cohesive you are, the more effective you are. And once we've gotten them, comfortably uncomfortable, I guess is a good way to put it. Now it's time to really sit down with pen and paper, and let's talk about some things, and let's put some processes into place. Let's develop rules of engagement, which are norming processes, right? Rules of engagement that we can sit down and we can sort of hash things out, how we're going to discuss conflict, how we're going to communicate, how we make decisions, how we hold meetings, a lot of things. You don't want to inundate it with a lot of rules, but you want to have some rules that give you a solid baseline to move forward. And then with the role clarification and the goal planning, we go from there.
Yeah, Coach and I have this cool slide that we share with our clients. It's form, norm, storm, perform. So
Yeah.
the idea that, we got to create something new. So we're going to form a plan and we're going to normalize some new behavior, knowing that the storm is coming. It's going to be uncomfortable. Like you said, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because it won't last long, or it won't last forever. You'll get into a place to where you're doing just as much work, maybe even less work than you're doing now, but it's going to be more directly tied to what you're owning for the team, and you're going to get more results doing it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of neglected to say too, as I was doing this as well, part of my background was I got a master's in strategic leadership. I did some executive education in business courses, and so I had an appreciation for both organizational development and really why a business exists, which is to make money at the end of the day, right? And that was really interesting to me. And one of the books that was required reading for one of those programs was a book called Committed Teams by Mario Musa, I think Derek Abernathy, and someone else. And so the model that you're talking about is the Bruce Tuckman model, or the forming, storming, norming, performing, and then ultimately adjourning, which was the phase they added last. But Musa had a 3x3 framework, which sort of took that, and what he found was that deeper commitment to goals, roles, and norms as the foundations were what separated high-performing teams from just regular teams, and even teams that were effective. And ultimately, there was a 3-step process. The first committing to those foundations, the second being a check-in sort of procedure that is built into the process, and ultimately evaluating and refining those processes and procedures to close the gap between what team members were saying they were going to do and what they were actually going to do, and then circling back. And this process is this 3x3 framework is cyclical, and each of those steps hits each of those foundations at any given point, which is great, because teams don't form and adjourn, so to speak, at the same point in time at any given time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Team members come and go. You bring in new people. Sometimes you don't have a say of who those individuals are. So the way you can sort of fit people in, it was the 3x3 framework does a great job of being able to sort of pinpoint as someone comes in to get them on board quicker.
You mentioned refining. That to me is the storm part, right? We're going to try to implement some things, knowing it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be iterative. We're going to make some adjustments along the way, and it's going to get better. That's the progression of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think is interesting, because as you've seen project management methodologies grow, the agile and scrum methodologies take on that real iterative process of what was basically team storming.
I was working with a client maybe last year that had more of that Scrum Agile. I actually like to get your thoughts on this, Coach, with and just it's a different approach. My understanding of it is that it just gets more feedback more quickly from the direct clients, and doesn't have as much hierarchy, I guess, or red tape with approval processes internally. Just wondering what your thoughts might be with like the benefit of that in association with like a high performance team.
I think so. If you think about project management, traditionally you've got the waterfall process, which is really make sure you've got the project charter set out. You've got to know exactly where you're going set out. You've got everyone's defined roles. You've got who's on the hook for it. You've got who are the people that approval processes, and that if you're thinking about deliver something at a high level, you build it first. You go through the process of make sure all the milestones in, and then you start the process. And there's big milestones that are far further away. So a lot of stuff has to happen for this big milestone to get hit. Now, that's great, because you can say, okay, we're getting a lot of stuff done up front. But the downside to that is that tends to be more red tape to get through, and you stop getting progress. And without the progress, people feel like nothing's happening. And progress equals happiness. If we're not seeing results, we tend to slow things down, tend not to get there. Agile is flipping that on its head, really, and the way I think about it, at least. And I'm not an expert, but it's really saying, okay, look, what can we do in this next couple of weeks? How can we have a sprint here, get it out there, get something delivered, see what works, and then iterate, iterate, iterate. So we have a product which is out there. So it's like I'd rather have something done for now, so you can see it and use it, and then we can move forward and take the next level of it. So I'm much more subscribed to that process. But I think of it it's so fascinating to hear what you share, Garret. But I think of it as like all of that stuff and keeping that very specific and the very tangible above the waterline, as we would call it, around the ROI and the deliverables, but also folding into that below the waterline practical psychology of why we do what we're doing. And that again actually comes back to the commitment. Like, why are you really here? Because you want to be here. Like, is this really for you? And do you know where we're going and what's our mission and what's the vision? And or are you just here for a paycheck? So that those two together. But for me, the results brings the value, right? So I like the distinction between those. And it's like, well, which one's best? Well, like I always say, it's the one that you use.
Yeah, absolutely. I just in addition, and I have a very basic understanding of agile methodology, but you hit the nail on the head there when you talked about that iteration where it's like, let's see what we can get out in the next 2 weeks. I think the telling part about that is what that methodology has proven over time is that the innovation at the end of that project far exceeds what the initial idea ever was, right? And I think that's a huge just a huge win for showing what it means when you're truly brainstorming, collaborating amongst the collective, and allowing everybody, basically pulling all of those experiences, all of those perspectives, all of those knowledge, skills, and abilities in to get the best possible outcome each time and in a shorter period of time.
Good. I'm curious if maybe we can peel the lid back on your company and just take a peek in with, it's a lot of practice in what we preach, right? So just curious with your company growth, and obviously you're not coaching people for years and years and years, although that would be great, but you have to be agile yourself to be nimble to navigate coaching different types of companies. So how do you implement some of these with your own employees, and how do you grow as a business yourself?
Absolutely. So one of my pieces is when I work with a company, it's a relationship, right? It's a relationship that will exceed my arbitrary timeline, but that arbitrary timeline is typically 90 days. And I do that just because you can always tell, 90 days usually it provides a beginning and an end to at least a measurable period of time so we can see progress. So I go in, I talk to them, and I go through all three phases, what these are, from engage, empower, enable phases. And they're actually the core values of my company. I use those as the actual phase names to get us there. But one of the things I always do as well is there's a lot of, leadway going in, lots of conversations, which ultimately pull out what is the real metric or metrics, not a lot, just a handful that we're really trying to get after, because they're going to be responsible for measuring that. I tell every single company that I work with, I am not going to change what happens in your company. I am going to come in and I'm going to lighten a path for people that are already seeking professional development, that just want to be better, that want to be more aligned to the vision and the strategy of the organization. And that's perfect. I can help brighten that path up so they can head down. But ultimately, it's about the people. It always starts and ends with people. That's all I can do is help set an azimuth and help people, stay on course. And I do that as well and that's some of where the methodology of military planning comes in with me, is we do a plan of actions and milestones, which is a military thing, and that's a 90-day plan. So there are deliverables, and I require those deliverables over time to make sure that individuals are staying invested as best I can. Ultimately, it is on them. But I firmly believe that you'll see, if we can get an engagement and we provide the tool on the backside, you see the change in results. And it has happened time and again. We see the change. And yeah, and typically, you know, the referrals come in after that. And it's a beautiful process. But yeah, a 90-day window is typically, and you know, it's after that, it's you can see the difference. And if you didn't get difference out of someone, they're usually not with the company anymore.
Which is just as valuable in some circumstances, right? It's like
absolutely.
That's one of the biggest distinctions that I often share, right? Because people get concerned. It's like, what if we do this and we figure out that we haven't got the right team? Good.
Yeah.
Right. Like then you'll know. Then you can do something about it. And it's like it's the next best thing to a yes, we're all in and we're going to be committed and we know that the team's most important and we know the goals is no, I'm not, rather than I'm not sure. Like it's much better. Yeah, it's so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's I like to tell people, and this is Gallup research from this end that I'm bringing up, but there's a difference between unengaged and disengaged, right? And we know that there's 67% of the workforce is unengaged, and a lot of that unengagement is just because, you know, again, they don't understand the vision and the values. They're not there's not a lot of transparency. They just need a little information.
They want it though, right, Garrett? They would welcome it if it were there.
Yes. Now the downside is there's 17% though that are disengaged, and those people, those are the ones that got to go. They're costing you money, right? And that's what I tell CEOs. These people are going to cost you money. You've got to make the hard decision. The unengaged, we can provide the information. They want it. They just don't know how to get it, and they're not asking for it. We give it to them, you're going to see that shift to engagement. But that 17%, that's who you got to be weary of.
Like how you speak their language, they're costing you money. You'll get their attention.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to make a comment about your comment about metrics too, because that's so key for us as well. Like what are we measuring? And it's not going to be 10, 15, 20 things. What do we want to accomplish? Like what's the top priority? Like must have, got to have it. Let's figure out a way to measure that and go. And we have some cool tools to embrace this gamification. You know, there's this whole culture, video game culture, this and that with like stats and how am I doing? We got a fun way to play the game, so to speak, so that people know, you know, are they succeeding? Are you winning in your business? So I think that's such a crucial element. Then you also mentioned people first. Another tool that we talk about on the show here is our mind scan at ProAdvisor Coach. We believe that business can be broken into 3 pillars: people, actions, and process. We've hit upon all 3 of them today, but people first always, internally and externally, like our employees, but also our clients. What drives people? How do we get them engaged? Engagement is such a key conversation with people. Actions speak for themselves, right? Innovation, how are you creating value for your clients? But process is so key because a lot of times it's the slowing down, it's the putting the action on hold, or, you know, telling people like, hey, we're just going to take a time out here to get things in place so that we can magnify the people and the actions. And a lot of companies don't want to take the time to do that, or they're scared of what they'll see if they do that analysis. And we have no idea what the potential is unless we do something like that, to where we just slow everything down, put some new things into place, and then just let people achieve what they're meant to achieve. People want to be a part of something. Let's give them that structure to do so and see what people are capable of.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, 85% of executives will tell you they understand the importance of having professional development and investing in people. And then it's only 5% of that 85% that actually have programs in place.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. This is all stuff that we know, and it's not mystical or anything, but again, it's like one of the hardest nuts to crack.
There's so much wisdom flying around here, Garrett. If you don't mind, give us a summation, or maybe something you're taking away from today that was a good sharpener for you, or just a new aha after our conversation today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that no matter what language you're using, right? We're talking about language, and Coach Nick brought it up, but you know, regardless of the language that you're using, when it's revolving around teams, and whether we're talking about behaviors or process or effectiveness or performance, ultimately it is about, as you mentioned, it's what was it, people, actions, and process, right? And it really is, and that's the same thing as for me is it's goals, roles, and norms, right? And I tell people, you can talk KPIs, you can talk key results, you can talk objectives, you can talk goals. They are the same thing. They're referred. It's nuances, really, right? But ultimately, it's always about results. And one aha moment that I take away, and I think you've seen this, is that high performing teams or higher performing teams, they win a lot, and it feels good to win. And when you win, you want to win more, especially with the people that you're winning with.
Mm-hmm. So well said. Thank you, Garret. Coach.
Yeah, like you got to have the wins. You got to celebrate the wins. I'm reading a book right now called The Art of Learning, and I think it's fascinating. And something that jumped out for me listening to that this morning was the reflection around the balance between wins and losses. Right, and we know that often you hear people say, "You either win or you learn," and it's the value that's in the losses, because when you succeed, you tend to party, but when you lose, you tend to ponder. But what really stuck out for me today was to invest in the loss, which I really love, which means like knowing that that's going to give you and pay you down the line, right? So I just jumped out at me as you said that, and like, wow, 85% of CEOs know it's important but don't do it. Like, that's why it's dangerous to know stuff. Right?
It is. It's absolutely astonishing.
But I'd see it all the time, and even when people are actually doing it, it's like, I know that. It's like, well, are you actually doing it? Are you really actually doing it? And I think one of the things that's interesting of what you shared with your program, Garret, is something we subscribe to, is that it's never done. And I reflect on this for my corporate career. I remember sitting in a position where I was in a place where just trying to cram all of this stuff down me and go to as many courses and two-day courses and online learning things as I could. And I was like, how do I know when I'm done here? Because when I go back to my desk, I take one thing, but the week after that, I've forgotten it all, or as it seems, at least. But I realized that it took me a long time to realize this, but it's never done. It has to be continuous. You have to have someone to support you there all the time. It's like you need this big push at the start, this big immersion, and all of these stuff to coming in and make sure everyone wants to be there and has that commitment. But it needs to be continuous, right? It needs to be a continuous way to do that. And thank you for sharing all that you shared today. It's been really some great stuff, Garret. This is a long takeaway for me, but one last thing was just what you said at the start, that distinction between the underscore for me of the high performance versus effectiveness is really powerful to think about, and reminds me of how important that is to remind other people, because that's where you get most resistance from. It's like, tell me the plan. Like, no, it's too early for you to have the plan. We've got to know if everyone's committed first, because it won't work otherwise, and everyone's getting set up for fail. So thank you very much.
No, absolutely. It was a great conversation, guys. I had a great time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing some simple secrets of the successful, Garret, and thanks for joining Truth Seekers. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction, so please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links to our masterclass, the Achiever's Mindset, and come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.